everybody. The No Huddle Show here from Lincoln Financial Field. And man, oh man, am I happy we don't have time to go back and take sound clips from the last podcast because I predicted the Eagles, and Eagles lost to the Cardinals, and here we sit. Final, what was it? What ended up being 34-7, dominating performance by the Eagles. And before we get into the game, I just want to say two things. I thought they wouldn't be able to run the ball against the Cardinals. They finished with like 124 yards. I thought the tight ends would have trouble. The tight ends caught a touchdown in the first two possessions. So not my finest performance, but without question, one of the Eagles' finest games.
Yeah, Eliot, I think this was the most complete game that we've seen from the Doug Pederson, Carson Wentz combination. And you think back to the game against the New York Giants. I said that was the coming-of-age moment for Carson Wentz to be able to lead that fourth quarter tying drive and fourth quarter winning drive with the Jake Eliot field goal at the end. This was his best game. And you talk about the numbers, 21 of 30, 304 yards, 4 touchdowns, the interception at the end of the first half, maybe the only mistake that he made all day on an ill-advised decision. Passer rating 128.3. But, Eliot, you look at Carson Wentz, and you look at his ability to connect on the deep ball with Nelson Aguilar, with Torrey Smith. That's what we were waiting to see, and I think this offense catapulted this team, and Carson Wentz lifted this team into the level of legitimate contenders today. Not just for the division, but for a whole lot more.
Yeah, and honestly, after this game, I'm midway through the third quarter, I looked over at you, and I said, we're going to be talking Super Bowl. Whether or not that's realistic or not, I don't know. You look around the rest of the NFC, I haven't really had a chance to dissect the scores from the afternoon games yet today, but the Eagles are 4-1. They'll go into Carolina to face a 4-1 Panthers team, and man, that's going to be a fun game. I mean, on the road, Thursday night, prime time, and I said this to you after the game, but it seems like every week we're talking about, all right, this is a test for the Eagles.
Yep. Week
1, they'd been struggling against the Redskins. They open on the road. That's a test for the Eagles. Week 2, going to Kansas City to face one of the best teams in the AFC. That's a test for the Eagles. You can go on and on. This Cardinals game, look, everyone's going to say this was a bad opponent, and that's fine if they want to say that. I can't sit here and say that because I thought the Eagles were going to lose this game. I think the Cardinals, clearly they were not as good as I thought they were. But going into this game, I thought this was a loss. So I can't sit here and say, oh, this is a bad team they beat up on, because I thought it was going to be a loss. So I think it was an impressive win for the Eagles. And really, they had this thing put away before the second quarter started.
Yeah, they really did. And now, like I wrote in the instant analysis post up on the website right now, nobody's going to confuse this Arizona Cardinals team with the 2007 Patriots. Nobody's going to think this was Vince Lombardi's Packers of the 60s or this was the Dallas Cowboys of the 90s. But the Eagles made them look, forget one-dimensional. They looked non-dimensional today. You look at Carson Palmer, 28 of 44, 291 yards, the one touchdown. Eagles sacked him twice. Larry Fitzgerald, 6 receptions on 10 targets, 51 yards, a career low against the Eagles. Andre Ellington, a running back, their leading receiver, 9 catches for 65 yards. They couldn't run the ball against the Eagles. They couldn't protect Carson Wentz against the Eagles. A little surprise there. Palmer entered this week being sacked 17 times. But the Eagles dominated this game in every facet. Special teams. Think about the field position that Kenyon Barner set them up with in the first half to build up that lead. Third down, they were something like 6 of 9 on third down at one point. Carson Wentz with 3 touchdowns and over 200 yards passing on third downs. His first 4-touchdown game came today. Just every facet of this game, the Eagles checked every box, Eliot. And whether it's the Cleveland Browns, whether it's the Arizona Cardinals, whether it's the Green Bay Packers or the Dallas Cowboys, to do that on an NFL Sunday, particularly after showing that you can win close games the last 2 weeks, this is a championship character type of team that we're seeing before our eyes.
I mean, look, last year the Eagles lost a lot of close games, and that's been the theme over the past few weeks, them winning close games. But this is another sign of this team maturing because they didn't have it in them last year to really blow teams out like this. I mean, yeah, the Cardinals, I was wrong. They're not a good team, but they dominated this game. And, it takes, like you said, in any given Sunday, I mean, it takes a really good team to dominate a team like that in the NFL. I mean, the Cardinals, like I said, did present, in my opinion, matchup problems for this team. The running game ended up with 124 yards, I believe, but they weren't overly impressive. I mean, the second half, I thought they were better. They started off slow, but Doug did stick with it. What'd they end up with?
122. They averaged 3.7 yards.
Well, that was with 2 Wentz kneels. So, I mean, they really had 124 yards, and then 33 attempts, including, I think that's what I see, 33 attempts, including Wentz's rushes.
Scrambles and everything.
So he did. I mean, Doug ran the ball, which I didn't think he would. And again, Zach Ertz and Trey Burton have touchdowns on the first 2 drives. But
Before we get too far into it, I just want to point one thing out, Eliot, and this is something that we talked about going into last week's game, and it became a real talking point coming off that Chargers win when the Eagles' offense held the ball for the final 6 minutes, salted out that victory, didn't give Phillip Rivers and the offense a chance to come on and mount a legitimate comeback or even take the lead in a one-score game. The Eagles end up winning 26-24. But again today, you look at that fourth quarter, the Eagles had a drive 9:14 in time of possession in the fourth quarter. And I know they were up big at that point. I believe, by a decisive score of 31-7. But to still keep the ball away from Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald and Jaron and John Brown, to hold on to the ball for 9 minutes and 14 seconds after putting together that 6-minute drive last week, that goes to show you that they could run the ball effectively, that Carson Wentz could be effective, that his decision-making was there. And those are the type of things that teams that make long playoff runs do on a weekly basis, and that's what the Eagles are doing right now, and it's pretty impressive.
And, I mean, look, me and you have had our debates about Chip Kelly, and we're not going to have a Chip debate right now, but that is one area Doug has clearly gets it. I mean, this team dominates time of possession. They were first in the league last year, I believe, or at least top 3. They're number 1 in the league this year, and I'm sure they will be again after today. And like you said, I mean, there's so many times where you look up and you say, man, how long has this drive been going? And it's, 8-9 minutes. And Brandon Graham said today in the locker room after the game, that's been huge for this defense because they're not playing as much. But to get to Doug, I mean, you can see early on that Doug is coming into these games and out-coaching his opposing head coach. I mean, the Eagles go up 21-0 in the first quarter. I believe the Eagles have scored on 4 of their opening drives in 5 games this year. And yeah, that is Wentz, that is execution, but a large part of that is Doug. I mean, he likes to script his first whatever plays, 15, 21 plays or whatever, and they work to perfection. I mean, to score 21 points is incredibly impressive. To do it the way they did, I mean, hitting Ertz over the middle. And how good was Wentz today on third down, actually, to get off on a tangent. But this, I mean, he said earlier this week, and he said multiple times, the number one thing he worked on this past offseason was situational football, which to him means third down and red zone. And today he was phenomenal, and really all season he's been. I wish there was a stat for clutch third downs because it feels like he's been great in that. But today especially, of his 4 touchdowns, 3 of them came on third down. I believe the Eagles at one point were 7 of 9. I'd have to look up and see what they finished. But Wentz was phenomenal today on third down. And that's the difference between winning and losing games. So we talk about, dissecting this game. You can only dissect so much because they dominated, but if you talk about what you learned from this team, again, we saw third down, they're winning. They're getting the teams off the field on third down. They're holding on to the ball. He did have a turnover today, Wentz, and it was not a good throw, but in general, they've been taking care of the ball. So, yeah, the Cardinals maybe aren't a great team, but how the Eagles are winning this game is extremely encouraging if you're an Eagles fan.
Yeah, Eliot, here's the number. They entered today's game with an average. They were leading the league in time of possession. The average was 35 minutes and 28 seconds. They won this game today holding the ball 35 minutes and 47 seconds. So it's right on target. And you think about keeping the defense fresh. You think about running the football effectively. And think about where we were back in week 2 at Arrowhead Stadium. You and I did the podcast, and we were screaming for the Eagles to run the ball, screaming for them to figure out what to do with LeGarrette Blount.
Yeah.
You fast forward, here we are to week 5. Eagles sit at 4-1, and LeGarrette Blount again today averaged 5.3 yards per carry, 14 carries, 74 yards. Kenyon Barner was an absolute godsend in all phases.
He ran really hard today on those kick returns.
23 yards, averaged 4.6, and Corey Clement, 7 carries for 17 yards. You talk about a slippery runner. You talk about an elusive runner with good vision. Kenyon Barner showed you that today, and it's that balance. So we talked about it on the podcast on Friday, Eliot. What would they be able to do against Patrick Pederson in the secondary? How would they be able to run the ball? What does the game plan look like? And here we are, 6 scrambles for Carson Wentz, 2 of them kneel downs at the end of the game, and that basically puts you at Carson Wentz passing attempts 34, rushing attempts 31. That's as balanced as you're going to get, and that's a pretty unique winning formula for them.
For sure. And I mean, you look at some of the other players, what they did today. I thought the tight ends were going to be an issue. Zach Ertz, 6 catches for 61 yards today and a touchdown. Trey Burton, 2 catches for 16 yards and a touchdown. And one thing we've really debated here, not debated, but you've brought up is Wentz's struggles down the field with his accuracy.
Not today.
Not today. And not really in training camp. So it was odd to see him struggle early on in the season with that. And I thought a little bit too much was being made of that. but today he was on the money. I mean, the pass to Torrey Smith was really good. That long touchdown, obviously Nelson Aguilar makes the touchdown, which is with his, breaking all those tackles after the catch. But that throw might have been Wentz's best deep throw of the season. I mean, putting it literally right on Aguilar's fingertips as he's cutting across the field. And in my report card, at first, I thought Wentz was a little erratic, just a little early on, but overall, I mean, if he throws the ball like he did today, this is going to be an extremely tough team to beat. And one thing I talked to a few players about in the locker room after the game was, to me, the thing I notice is Wentz always needs to be first. Like, even today, I noticed when they run out of the tunnel, he's the first. When they run in, he's first. Jalen Mills said today his car is always the first one to leave, and it always seems like it's the last one there. And I think players talked about that today, about how his personality is rubbing off on this team. And I think you really saw that today, because Carson Wentz, yes, it was North Dakota State, but this guy was a winner in college.
Yep.
And, people can debate how much quarterback win-loss record matters, but he knows how to consistently win. He knows how to get this team up for games where, at North Dakota State, he probably 90% of his games he went into it, thinking they would win, or, being heavily favored. And that's a situation this Eagles team has struggled with in the past. But I think you're really seeing Wentz's personality rub off on the team, and the fact that they're up for every game. They play really hard on every snap, and that's partially Doug. But this team really knows how to get up, and they've been competitive in every single game for every single snap, and that's incredibly impressive.
And I think you're seeing the evolution of a quarterback. You're seeing him develop. And let's be real about this. They were 1-7. He was 1-7 in one-score games last year. They've already won 3 of those so far through the first 5 weeks. You look at what he's been able to do. His deep ball accuracy had been an issue earlier this year. You saw him completely miss Alshon Jeffrey when he got behind the Giants secondary by 2 steps. You saw him leave a couple opportunities on the field against the Redskins back in week 1. But today, he was deadly accurate on the deep ball. You think to last week, he was deadly accurate on the sideline throw deep to Nelson Aguilar and the throw deep over the middle to Zach Ertz. These are things week by week you're seeing Carson Wentz check off boxes and accomplish things on the football field that we hadn't seen through his first 18, 19 games as a rookie. Today, I thought he really put it all together. And I think that if we want to make any sweeping judgments on Carson Wentz, it is that he has taken that leap that he needed to take for the Eagles to be a legitimate contender going into this season. And we're already over a quarter of the way through this season, Eliot, and it just seems like all of the things that we thought might have been concerns during his rookie year, might have been things that we wanted to see him improve on in his second year. He's done it.
Yeah, I mean, he's thrown the ball. They haven't added it up yet, but I think he's thrown the ball roughly 180 times in 5 games. And that interception he had, I think you can make the argument, was really maybe the only time this season where the ball hasn't been tipped and he's really put the ball in harm's way. I mean, I'm sure there's 1 or 2 snaps or throws I'm forgetting, but to throw the ball up that many times, and yes, they are more balanced than they used to be, but I think that's what's impressive about him is he's so smart with the football. And last year when he threw 14 interceptions in 16 games, that wasn't really characteristic for him. He didn't throw a ton of interceptions in college, and he has that gunslinger label attached to him, but that doesn't mean he's reckless with the ball. That just means he's willing to keep going deep, and I think that's what you saw today. He talked about it after the game. He said, I have always had faith in Torrey Smith, and you saw that today in the fact that he kept throwing deep to him. So that's who you have in Carson Wentz, but I think what you're seeing now, 20, 21 games into his career, is he is pretty smart with the football, and he doesn't put it in harm's way a lot. So, but the next thing I really wanted to talk about, now that we've, gone about Wentz for so long, the secondary. I thought the secondary was really good today. Rasul Douglas gets the start, even though Jalen Watkins is back healthy. Jalen Mills is out there today. He he gets looked at by trainers temporarily, but then he comes back. I thought the secondary stepped up big time today against a Cardinals team that, their offensive line struggles, but decent quarterback in Carson Palmer, and really skilled receivers. So I thought they played very well.
Oh, I thought so too. And I think that when you look at what they've been able to do over the course of this season, particularly today, Eliot, they're no longer that top concern, that top worry that we all thought they'd be going into the year. Patrick Robinson's been a real pleasant surprise. Jalen Mills, combining with Robinson, they held Larry Fitzgerald to 51 yards today. He's killed them in the past, 8 touchdowns in 7 career games against them. So clearly that was the priority, take away Fitzgerald, but they really did a nice job of taking the Arizona receivers out of this game. Mm-hmm. And Jaron Brown and John Brown are two speedsters, two of the fastest wide receivers in football, and they were essentially irrelevant today. So I look at what they've been able to do. Rodney McLeod had a big game, saved the touchdown at the end. Malcolm Jenkins had a couple of timely tackles.
Yeah, what a hustle play.
Absolutely. And I just think that not that the concerns about the secondary were overblown, but much like we've talked about Wentz, they've really played their way into being, if not a strength of this team, an aspect of this team that you don't feel worried about that matchup regardless of who's on the other side.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure the issues, the potential worries about the secondary were overblown. I just think everyone's played up to their potential. I mean, when you looked, you could say, all right, well, maybe Jalen Mills will be good, but they have an issue at the other secondary spot. Malcolm Jenkins took, in my opinion, a little bit of a step back last year. What if he takes another step back? You could look and you could see there were potential issues, but you thought, all right, maybe this will work out. I mean, Jalen Mills, yeah, he gets targeted a lot, but he is an awesome tackler. And you can really see that he does give up catches sometimes, but he's great at minimizing damage. Today, Rasul Douglas, you saw what the Eagles like about him. I think it was in the second quarter. A long attempt by Carson Palmer. Douglas was beat on the play, but he uses his length to get up, just barely get his fingertip on it, or at least it looked like he did, and deflect the pass. You kind of saw today what the Eagles wanted out of each of their cornerbacks, and they're getting it. I mean, Patrick Robinson has played really, really well. And the thing is, if you look at the 5 cornerbacks on the Eagles roster of significance, between Jalen Mills, Patrick Robinson, Rasul Douglas, Sidney Jones, and Ronald Darby, you can make the argument the best 2 cornerbacks aren't even on the field right now for this team. So if they get those guys back, it'll be really interesting to see how they handle it, because how can you look Jalen Mills in the eyes and bench this guy? I mean, he's played really well. He's met every request you've made of him, even when it was covering Julio Jones, following Odell Beckham 2 weeks ago. So it'll be really interesting to see how they handle that. That's a problem for later down the year, but it's a good problem to have and a problem we didn't think they would have.
Right, and it's a great problem to have, but it's also, Eliot, the Ronald Darby injury, rather. Right. It's kind of turned into maybe not a blessing in disguise, but it's created an opportunity for Rasul Douglas
and the Jalen Watkins injury.
Right, to play much earlier than this coaching staff wanted to. If I remember correctly, he was inactive week 1 against the Redskins, or at the very least,
he was a healthy scratch. He was a healthy scratch.
He was a healthy scratch week 1, and here you are in week 5.
Didn't start week 2 either.
And he's making plays. He had an interception against Eli Manning on an underthrown ball here, but it's still an interception in a division game. Now, whether or not he's still in this lineup by year's end when Darby comes back, and if Sidney Jones comes back, these snaps and this playing time is going to pay huge dividends for Rasul Douglas going into his second year. So whether he figures to be a starter or in the nickel or even playing significant snaps, or if he's even the odd man out once Darby and Jones get healthy and come in here, this playing time is something that the Eagles didn't anticipate him getting, didn't anticipate him being able to handle as well as he has, and it's going to be critical to his development what he's been able to do during these last 4 games.
Yeah, and the thing about the secondary is, look, I mean, they haven't faced a ton of good quarterbacks this year. I mean, they faced I guess Alex Smith is pretty good, Kirk Cousins. And, yeah, maybe when they face,
Phillip Rivers.
When they face some of the top quarterbacks in the league, maybe Rasul Douglas and Jalen Mills will struggle. But the reality is, and this kind of gets into the larger picture, what I wanted to talk about, there's not a ton of good quarterbacks out there. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. Yeah. There's maybe 10 really good quarterbacks in the league. I think Carson Wentz is one of them.
And there aren't many really good teams either. No. You talk about every team you can look up and down and say that they have holes or that they need to address, X, Y, or Z in terms of the makeup of their roster or even what they're able to do on a weekly basis. And we've seen this Eagles team, because of how young they are at so many key positions, we've seen them really develop. And we've seen Wentz really develop quickly.
So it'll be all right. So we want to talk about this early on. I feel like we've dissected this beatdown the Eagles handed out. Larger picture here. I mean, it's going to be, it's not even Monday yet, so it's not even Overreaction Monday. It's Overreaction Sunday evening. Where can this team go? I mean, you look around the NFC, I'm still not big on the Cowboys. I know we have our bet that I think they'll finish under 7 wins, 7 or under. But, I mean, the Packers, the Falcons, I guess the Seahawks. I mean, where do you think this team is, and what do you think can be realistic expectations? I picked them to win the division. I still feel very good about that. I know you thought they were at least going to be in competition. So both of us thought they were, if not a playoff team, a borderline playoff team. How far do you think they can go based off what you've seen today, but also over the first 5 games?
Yeah, I think, Eliot, that they are probably, if you're breaking it down into tiers, I think that the Packers, even though they're losing to the Cowboys right now, I think the Packers and the Falcons are in that upper tier. And then I think the Eagles are the best team in that second mix. I think the Cowboys are squarely in the mix, and I've said it before on this podcast, and I feel stronger about this every week. The NFC East is going to be decided by the winners of those two games the Eagles have against the Cowboys in November and December. I still believe that if the Eagles are going to make the playoffs, if they're going to win the division, it's going to come down to taking care of business against Dallas. Then you have teams like the Rams, you have teams like the Seahawks, you have teams like the Lions, the Falcons, the Panthers.
Yeah.
I think the Eagles are a playoff team, but I want to see what they do against Carolina. What do they do against a very physical defense like the Denver Broncos? What happens in those two games against the Dallas Cowboys? But let's say, you start out and the Eagles are sitting here at 4-1. Even if you lose on Thursday night in Carolina, you come back and you take care of business, you sweep the Redskins, you're 5-2.
Yeah.
You talk about being 5-2 after the first 7 weeks. Then if you win any fewer than 9 games, the season's a disappointment. Do I think that they can get a bye in the first round of the playoffs? I don't know that they're quite there yet, but I think anything short of winning the division and making the postseason is going to have to be considered a disappointment for this team.
I mean, the Panthers are a team that, look, you can go into Carolina next Thursday, so I guess it's this week, and lose the game. But if you're competitive in that game, you take the best punch the Panthers have, you step up to the spotlight of being in prime time against another playoff team, that can be an emotional win for the Eagles. Look, I mean, I know emotional wins aren't going to help them get a bye, and even though this team is now without question a playoff contender, should be looking at playoff positioning, they're also still a team I think that can get emotional wins because they're second-year quarterback, second-year head coach. But when you talk about what we should expect from this team going forward, the Eagles have started out 4-1 twice since 2000. They did it in 2006 and they did it in 2014. Both times they finished with at least 10 wins, and they finished 10-6. 2006 they made the playoffs and won a playoff game. 2014, Chip's second year. I mean, most 10-win teams should be a playoff team, and they were maybe even better than they were in 2013. They just didn't end up qualifying for the postseason. So I think at this point, if the Eagles don't finish with 10 wins, especially with how their schedule shakes out after this Carolina game, you have to look at that as a disappointment. I don't think this team is going to collapse. I think they had their struggles last year. Obviously, the Lane potential head injury or having a head injury, potential concussion might be an issue against Carolina, but it doesn't seem to be long term. I mean, I think this team has no excuse not to win at least 10 games, and I think they could get to 11 now because they're showing that they're going to beat the teams they should, and they've stepped up in the games that they need to against good teams.
No, I agree, and that's why I think that the ceiling has never been higher for Carson Wentz. It's never been higher for this team. They have a formula now, and I know that people are going to say that's cliche, and I keep repeating myself. But you dominate time of possession. You play stifling defense. You can salt out victories in the fourth quarter. You can run the ball. Those are all ingredients to playoff caliber football teams. Now, they've done it against a one-win Los Angeles Charger team. They go in and beat the Giants at MetLife today. They've done it against a winless Giants team, and they did it against a really subpar and under-talented at this point Arizona Cardinals team. Can this show go on the road? Can they go to Carolina? Can they come back and play Denver? Can they do it against the Cowboys? Those are going to be the tests. But if I'm sitting here and it's the second Sunday in October rather, because last week was October 1st, I think the Eagles are right there in the mix. I think that they are one of probably the top 4 or 5 teams in the NFC.
Yeah, and I saw, I think it was Jimmy Kempski of Philly Voice tweet this out. The Eagles have the best plus-minus point differential at plus 38, at least as of right now before these 4 o'clock games are over, in the NFL. So, the NFC. So, yeah, they maybe they haven't played great teams every week, but I think their schedule hasn't certainly not been easy. 3 of the first 4 were on the road. Arizona today is what it is. But here, let's do this to wrap the podcast up. So I'm going to give you the name of every team in the NFC that currently has a winning record.
Okay.
And I'll do the Cowboys too since they're winning.
Yep.
You just say if the Eagles are better or worse than them. And then if I disagree, I'll chime in. If I don't, it means I agree. So Cowboys.
I think the Eagles...
They're better than the Cowboys.
Marginally better.
All right. Well, we agree better. I think they're considerably better. I think we'll see that when they go there. But Redskins, better?
Better.
All right, Rams?
Better.
Seahawks? I'm not ready to say that.
Ready to say that. I'm even or worse.
All right, Packers. I'm not there yet.
Probably a little worse.
Lions?
About the same.
All right, I'll go a little better there. And then Panthers, I guess we'll find out Thursday.
We'll find out Thursday.
I think they're dead even with them, though.
Dead even, I give a slight edge to the Panthers.
Falcons?
Falcons are better.
All right, so you have three. So from what I can tell, you have the Falcons, the Packers, the Seahawks, and maybe the Cowboys.
Yes.
And we didn't include the Panthers. So we're talking 3 or 4 teams. So I think the expectation for this team, I mean, not to get overhyped, but look, can this team make it to the NFC Championship game? Absolutely. I think they can. And if you can make it there, then yeah, you're a Super Bowl contender. If you're in the playoffs, here's my thing about the NFL. If you're in the playoffs and you have a quarterback, you're a Super Bowl contender. If you're Houston and you qualify and you have, Brock Osweiler or whoever's starting for you.
Oh, they have a quarterback now, though.
Yeah, well, the Eagles might have a top 5 or now you're right. The Texans do, right? But I mean, the Eagles, Wentz is top 8, top 7. I mean, he's playing really well.
Oh, you'll see when the power rankings come out on Tuesday. I do see some big moves coming for Carson
I think
Wentz.
He's going to be up high. And so if they can get in the playoffs, which I think they will, and they have Wentz, Wentz hasn't played in a playoff game, so you take that a little bit in consideration. But I don't see any reason this team, I mean, who they face in the playoffs, I don't see any reason, any team out there where I would say they have no shot against that team.
I think they're in the conversation, and they would not get blown out by any team in the NFC, and I think they're teams they'd beat.
Yeah, no, I agree. So look, I mean, big win today. I was wrong. I'm now 15-6 since Doug Cook took over, so I got to pick it back up. Tough one for me, but obviously a very impressive win for the Eagles.
I'm 4-1 picking the Eagles this year.
You're doing good this year. I'm 3-2. So.
Back when everybody called me a troll week 1 and week 2 for picking against them.
The Carolina one's going to be a tough one to pick.
I agree.
That one's going to be tough. So it's going to be a crazy next few days. We'll do our reaction pod with Joe on Tuesday. So make sure you guys tweet us your takes off of this game. You can go just Cardinals. You can do larger picture since this was such a blowout win. Tweet us at #TheNoHuddleShow or email us at TheNoHuddleShow@NJ.com. And we'll go over your takes on Tuesday. The Eagles are going to practice Tuesday. They fly to Carolina Wednesday. And then Thursday night, I mean, this is going to be an amazing game. I've only been to that Panther Stadium once, and I think it was when Bradford was the quarterback and Chip was there. That is a great stadium. That is a tough defense. I remember walking out that stadium last time thinking, and that was the year the Panthers went to the Super Bowl. I remember thinking that's a Super Bowl team. And I'm not saying they are this year, but this is a great, great test for the Eagles.
I think it's going to represent their toughest test of the season so far outside of Kansas City. Kansas City's probably going to be the best team they've played on the schedule. Carolina's going to be close. Before we get out of here, Eliot, I know they're starting to shut the lights off. Number 1, thank you for the 5-star reviews. Keep them coming. We're climbing up the rankings. We love the feedback.
Yep.
Throw me a follow on Twitter at Matt Lombardo PHL. You can follow Eliot if you're not already at Eliot Shorr-Parks. But 5-star reviews. Follow us on Twitter. The show's continuing to grow. Subscribe to the show, and it's all because of you guys, and we really enjoyed the feedback.
Yep. There you go. Can't say it better. So, good win for the Eagles. A lot to talk about in this upcoming week. Matt, I will talk to you and Joe on Tuesday.
Looking forward to it.